Hey there, beloved saints. I wanted to go over this because a lot of preachers are falsely using these things Jesus said to condemn believers instead of encourage them. These things should encourage a believer to continue to serve the Lord and be a disciple, although that's not what saved us. All right. Let me just say this. Discipleship is costly to you. It's a lot of work for you. It's something that costs you personally. Salvation, it cost Jesus. It cost him his life, his blood. You get it? You can't mix the two because salvation is of grace and not of works. So if you make salvation based on discipleship, you're making it based on works. And that's why people are confused, because a lot of people are putting conditions of discipleship. John MacArthur is famous for this. Pick up your cross and follow me. If you don't pick up your cross, you're not worthy to be my disciple, that kind of thing. Okay, we're saved because Jesus picked up his cross and died on it. All right? Don't get it twisted and start thinking some cross you're picking up is going to compare. How dare us to think that? But I want to show you what Jesus is doing here in this story about inviting people to a great supper. All right. Now, people take this stuff out of context. Jesus is warning the Jews that they have been invited to a great wedding feast for the Son. Okay. But because they're going to make an excuse and reject his invitation, that he's going to send invitations to who? The Gentiles. All right. So you'll see this parable, this story is telling just that. Because you Jews want to make excuses and not come to the wedding feast because you don't believe who I am. I'm going to go out to the highways and the byways and invite wedding guests. All right. That's what this story is about. And people twist it up to try to condemn believers. All right. So I want to look at this. This is in Luke 14:16. And then he said unto them, a certain man made a great supper and bade many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, come, for all things are now ready. I believe this is also told in another one of the four Gospels, but we'll just use this one. And they with all one consent began to make excuse. First said unto him, I bought a piece of ground, I must needs and go see it. Who buys ground before they even look at it? Okay, see, he's saying that these people are without excuse. They have Moses and the prophets. They should have been able to see it. But what they're doing here is they're trying to see it before. But they should have seen it because of the gospel, because of the Old Testament law and prophets. They should have known what Jesus was like. But instead, they're blinded. All right? And another said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray have me excused. Again, who buys oxen before they see that they can work in the field? Nobody. All right? So the point here is these Jews are without excuse. All right? When they stand before God, they're going to be without excuse. And another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. We know what marriage to another wife means. It's spiritual adultery. So that servant came and showed his Lord these things, and the master of the house, being angry, this is about God, being angry with the Jews because they rejected the invitation of the wedding banquet. All right? Said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring hither the poor, the maimed, the halt, and the blind. Now, this is also a picture of the religious Pharisees that should have known who he was, not. But him going to the poor on the street, the blind, the crippled, they did receive him, as well as overt sinners like prostitutes. They received him. That's why the harlots and the publicans will enter heaven before these religious people. All right? So you've got to see that here. So, he says, and the Lord said to the servant, go out in the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say unto you that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my supper. So the people that were invited, okay, the chosen, the Jews, they're not going to enter. All right. Now, of course, there's a remnant that do. He's saying as a whole, Israel was bidden. They did not come. They will not enter the kingdom of heaven until they receive Christ. That's what this is talking about. All right. Then it says, and there went great multitudes with him, and he turned and said to them, if any man come to me and hate not his father and his mother, his wife and children and brethren and sisters, and yea, his own life also, he can't be saved? No, he cannot be my disciple. All right. You'll see in Acts, it says, I believe it says this woman was a Jewess and so was a disciple. So it distinguishes believers from disciples. Not every believer is a disciple. The disciples went out and preached the gospel and started ministries along with apostles. Okay. So, we should all try to be a disciple of Jesus and preach the gospel, be fishers of men, like he told us to. But that is not what saves us, all right? Don't get it twisted. If you think you're saved by being a disciple, you think you're saved by your own faithfulness, obedience, and works, all right? That's false. So, and what it means to hate not his father, it doesn't mean you literally despise your mother and father. That's against the law. What it's saying is you prefer Jesus over your own family. That Jesus comes before everyone. That's all that means. Okay? Now, when he's talking about them, you cannot be my disciple, this is before his death, burial, and resurrection. All right? Let's look at the context here. Before his death, burial, and resurrection, he's telling these Jews, if you want to be my disciple, you cannot do that unless you're willing to even lay down your own life, because you're going to be put in jail. You're going to be, you might even die for my name's sake. So I don't need half-hearted people here. You need to know what you're getting into when it comes to being my disciple. All right. So if you're not willing to do that, you can't be my disciple, because that's what it's going to cost. All right. This is a warning to people that he cannot have half-hearted people as his disciples, as the foundation of his ministry, his earthly ministry. It's going to cost them. It's going to cost them because the Pharisees, the people in the temple system, probably kick them out. They're going to be beaten. They're going to be thrown in jail. There's a lot of warnings about that. Okay. So don't take this out of context and try to apply it to us now as if it's saving someone. All right. So, and whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be saved, cannot be my disciple. You cannot change that to salvation when it's about service to God. All right. Disciples are those that serve Christ. All right. Jesus saved us by his sacrifice. A disciple makes sacrifices for Jesus. Okay. But we don't boast that we're saved by the sacrifice we make for Jesus, because discipleship is work and it costs you. Salvation costs Jesus. That's why they got to be divided. Okay. You cannot make these qualifiers for salvation. Whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth down first and counteth the cost, whether he has sufficient to finish it? Do you see this now? All right. Here's what he's saying. You better sit down and count the cost to yourself before you make a commitment to me. All right? How do I know? That's what it says. Which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? See, he's saying you can't be my disciple until you've sat down and counted the cost to yourself to know whether you're going to finish this or not. Because if you are going to be dissuaded by the things you're going to come against, don't bother. Okay? So he's saying flat out, I'm warning you people. hate your mother and father, pick up your cross. If you're not willing to count the cost to yourself to see if you can finish this, don't do it for me. All right? Again, this is before his death, burial, and resurrection. You cannot take these things and make them qualifiers for salvation. That is the worst false teaching. It's horrible, and it confuses people. And it makes salvation about what we're doing, the sacrifices we make, instead of the sacrifice Jesus made. And it's infuriating that people do that. So, right there, he tells them to count the cost to themselves before they commit themselves to be his disciple. Do you see that? You got to hate your mother and father, pick up your cross. And which one of you would not sit down and count the cost to see if you could finish the building before you started it? You get it now? All right. Lest haply, after he's laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. See it? If you're not willing to go all the way with me, even die, because you might, don't bother. Don't bother following me in my earthly ministry, because I'm going to end up dying and all the flock's going to be scattered and you guys are going to be in danger. So if you're not willing to go all the way with me, don't commit to be my disciple. That's what he's saying. All right. Or what king going to make war against another king sit down not first and consult whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Again, count the cost to yourself to determine if you're willing to do what it's going to take to be my disciple here in my earthly ministry and beyond. If you're not willing to forsake these things, don't commit to me as a disciple before his death, burial, and resurrection. All right? Warning them. They're not worthy to be saved. Nobody's worthy to be saved. Worthy to be his disciple. They can't be his disciple. They need to really think and count the cost to themselves. Does salvation cost us? No. Eternal life is a free gift by God's grace through faith in what Jesus did alone. It costs Jesus, but it doesn't cost us. But when you make discipleship part of what saves, now you're making it about what we do. And that is way wrong. All right? Again, he's telling them to count the cost to themselves before they commit to being his disciple. Now, this is before his death. Okay? All right. Or else why other is a great way off, he sendeth an ambassage and desirous conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he have, he cannot be my disciple. Do you see that again? Now, John MacArthur's telling people you got to forsake all you have to be saved. And that is wrong. Again, this is before his death, burial, and resurrection. He's talking to Jews about his earthly ministry, about what a disciple would give up. Some of them would give up their lives. Most of them did, except John. And he suffered terribly too, was put on the island of Patmos, tortured, put in jail, all kinds of stuff. Okay, so again, he's warning them, count the cost for yourself. If you're not willing to leave your family and even possibly your life, you cannot be what? My disciple. Okay, we have to determine that word. All right, it is not salvation. It is what you're doing and sacrificing for Jesus. But this was very specific time. This was during the earthly ministry of Jesus. That was what was required of disciples during that time. All right. Now, if you decide to be a disciple of Jesus, which I think we all should, he said, go and make disciples of every nation. We should do that. Then yes, you can have cost to yourself. He said he came to bring a sword. So it will divide families. Some families don't like Jesus and it'll break up your family and you'll have issues. All right. Other times you can have issues in your workplace. It can still cost us, but that is not what saved us. This is a very specific time during his earthly ministry, and he's warning he doesn't need half-hearted people. If you aren't willing to sit down and count the cost to yourself, possibly even die for me, you cannot be my disciple. That's what he's saying over and over again. So likewise, whosoever of you that does not forsake all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill, but men cast it out for others to hear, let them hear. Okay, so if salt has to remain salty or it's worthless, okay? Again, you need to be one willing to give up everything. If you're going to be my disciple here in this earthly ministry, you need to know what it's going to cost you. And if you're not willing to do that, you cannot follow me. Okay, you guys need to go. Okay, Jesus got rid of a lot of disciples that were half-hearted when he said, if you don't drink my blood and eat my flesh. They're like, this is a hard hearing, they got to get out of here. And there was just left a few people. And he asked Peter, you going to leave too? He goes, you have the words of eternal life. Where are we going to go? All right, so he cut out the half-hearted people. But that's not to say they couldn't be saved. It's about his earthly ministry and what it would cost them to be a disciple. Now, does Jesus say you have to count the cost to be saved? No, he said his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Come to him, all you who labor, work, and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Okay, that's salvation, not discipleship. And again, these disciples were a very specific disciple. These were ones in his earthly ministry that he knew would be put in jail, beaten, persecuted, and even die. So he says, hey, if you're not willing to do that, you can't be my disciple. You've got to count the cost to yourself. And if you're not willing to pay that cost, you can't be my disciple. All right? So I'm hoping you guys understand the difference here. This should never be used against a believer to condemn them to see whether they're saved or not. It has to be read in context. All right, guys. God bless.